Welcome. Today we're going to create a travel authorization within the travel and expense module within PeopleSoft. A travel authorization is an estimate of what the employee's cost may be for hotel, transportation, meals, and so forth. After the travel authorization is submitted and approved, the amount on the travel authorization becomes an encumbrance on your budget, setting it aside from the budget. Travel authorizations are required for expenses $5,000 or greater, all foreign travel, and all travel advances. Before we begin, here are a few tips and tricks that will help when creating a travel authorization. As the proxy, your USC ID will default. Be sure to change the USC ID if creating on behalf of the traveler. Use the Quick Fill option when creating a travel authorization to select expense lines, as this will populate the location and date for all expense lines selected. Only one expense line for each expense type is required for a travel authorization. Use the default accounting action to populate the accounting detail for each expense line. Just be sure to change it if different for a line or many lines. Travel authorizations must be future dated. Be sure to use the actual dates of travel when creating the transaction. Once a travel authorization has been associated to an expense, it is no longer available to use again. Be sure to include the destination and dates in the description field, making it easier to identify when associating to an expense report. Now you're ready to create a travel authorization. We're going to begin by navigating to Main Menu, Employee Self-Service, Travel and Expenses, Travel Authorizations, Create Modify. Remember, your USC ID is defaulted here. We need to go out, use the magnifying glass to find the traveler that you're creating this travel authorizations for. So we're going to select Lloyd Tabor. He's the traveler today, and we're going to click the Add button. We're going to begin by adding the description, making sure to include the purpose of the trip as well as the dates. And this will help you identify when trying to associate to an expense report. So we're going to go to the AICPA conference. And it's very limited. This field is very limited, so you want to make sure that you abbreviate as much as possible. But I will also show you at the end of creating this transaction where you can add additional information if you feel it's necessary. We're going to Hong Kong. Let's abbreviate, and we're going to put the date. And we're actually going to add, when creating this transaction, you're actually going to future date it and add the to and from dates for the actual trip. But for the purpose of today's training, we're going to actually just create it for today. We're going to add the default location, which is foreign, and we're going to add our date. But remember here, you would actually add, if it's a weeks-long trip or 4 days, you would actually add those future dates right here. We're going to add attachments. Attachments are not necessary for travel authorizations, but if you do have some quotes that you would like to add to the transaction and that you think that the approvers would like to see, then you can add those here. So I'm actually going to add a hotel quote. So we're going to add the attachment. We're going to browse. Here's my hotel quote. We're going to select it. We're going to click the upload button. And here we go. So the hotel quote has been uploaded and is now attached. We're going to click OK. And the number 1 indicates that there actually is an attachment here. Now we're ready to add our expense lines. And we're going to do so by using the Quick Fill. And when you use the Quick Fill option, remember, it will automatically then default the location for each expense line as well as the dates. So we're going to click Quick Fill. So our expense types for this trip are going to be air travel expenses, ground travel, hotel lodging, and meals. Then we're going to click OK. And you notice that all 4 of those expense lines have now been added. Before we add description to each line, we're going to actually go into our actions drop-down box. We're going to select default accounting and we're going to click go. We're going to add our chart field information here. And when we add it here, that will then add it to all 4 expense lines, which means that you don't actually have to add the accounting detail line by line. It does it here. This works really well if the accounting detail is the same for all expense lines. If it's not the same for all expense lines, then you may want to add those that detail line by line. So to get your chart field information, you're going to go to the crosswalk, and there is a video showing you how to use the crosswalk to input your USC Department fund to retrieve a chart field string that PeopleSoft will recognize. And so we've done that, and the chart field string that I'm going to use for this transaction is CL071, Department 211070, Fund E2452, and Class 202. This transaction is not being charged to a project, but if it were, I would have to make sure that I included 3 additional fields: the PC business unit, the project, and activity. But like I said, we're not charging this to a project, so our chart field information is complete, and we can click OK. Now we want to make sure that that information has been added to each line, and we can notice here that the accounting information is added. There we go. So each line now has accounting details. You'll also notice that the account information has been defaulted to 52024. That will always be the account that you use, and that will never need to be changed. Okay, so let's add all of the necessary information to each expense line. So we're going to add the description. So air travel is return trip from Colombia to Hong Kong. Our estimated amount for the cost of the ticket is going to be $1,200. We have to add information in the ticket number field. We understand that you may not have the ticket number right now, as this is just an estimate, but we're going to just add the name of the airline here. Okay. And notice when we click in another field or tab out, the amount then populates on the accounting detail line as well. Let's move down to ground transportation. We're going to say taxi to and from hotel and conference center. We're going to estimate that that's going to cost about $200. And if we click down here in the amount field, it will populate. Okay, moving on to hotel and lodging. We're actually staying at the Hyatt Regency for all nights away. We estimate that that's going to cost about $900. And we click in the amount field here, and that will populate. Finally, our meals. We're going to estimate for meals for all days away. And we're going to click in the box here, and we're going to estimate that our meals are going to cost about $400. Clicking in the amount field to populate that on the accounting detail line. And our total comes out as is $2,700. So we have entered all the information, and we're going to save for later. We're going to click Save for Later, as that will give us an authorization ID. And also, if there are any important information missing, then red boxes will appear indicating that those boxes need to be complete. It looks like we have all of the information we need. We're going to scroll back up, and we're going to click the Summary and Submit button. All right, before I submit, I did mention that our description field is limited with space. You can't get a lot of information there. You need to do a lot of abbreviating. But if you feel that additional information is required for the traveler and or the approver, then you can add that additional information here in the Notes section. So let's click the Notes link. And just to show you, we're going to just type "this is a test," and we're going to add that note. And when you notice that the note shows up here at the bottom of the screen, tells you who added the note and the date and time. If you can add as many notes as you can, and I'm just going to say this is an additional note. And you're going to click the add notes, and that note is added as well. And so these notes actually travel with the transaction as they move through the approval workflow. So everyone approving this transaction will be able to see any notes that have been added. Okay, so we're done with adding our notes. We're going to click OK. And notice now that you've added the notes, the speech bubble here has been, then now you can see squiggle lines. So just indicating that notes have been added. Okay, so now we're going to check the box saying that we certify that these costs are reasonable estimates. We understand that the expense report needs to be submitted within 7 days of return from the trip, and that the university reserves the right to not reimburse expenditures without receipts or not defined on in the university policy. So once we agree to that, we're going to submit for approval. We're going to confirm that we want to submit by clicking the OK button. And here we go. We have the travel authorization ID, begins with a 1 with all your zeros and number 13. So you're going to notice that travel authorizations are going to begin with the letter 1. If you're creating any travel advances, they will begin with the number 2, and then all expense reports will begin with a 3. So they should be fairly easy to identify. All right, you don't have to do this, but we're going to click this refresh approval status button to update the status, which is now showing submission in process. So we click this refresh approval status button, and then the status then changes to submit it for approval, which is indicating that it's actually now going to start working its way through the approval workflow. So we're going to click the approval history, and you're going to notice that first it needs to go to the employee that you created the transaction for, and they're going to approve that. Then it will move into approval level 1, approval level 2, and both of these approval levels are a pooled approach, which means many people are in that pool and that can approve. And once one person approves that, then that means that it drops off that the other individual's work list, and you don't have to worry about that. And then the final approval is always going to be the travel department. Okay. Your travel authorization is created. It's now moved into the approval workflow, and you're done. Thanks for joining us today, and have a great day.